Hi guys, how are you all? This is FJ What If? Today we are going to discuss about what if Naruto was Madara's student part 16. Before start the episode, please like and subscribe my channel. Chapter 16. Falling Petals. In Konoha, the usual dark gray clouds were hanging over the world like a gargoyle, ready to strike on sinners. The clouds created a darkness that blanketed over the village, not akin to the soft embrace, like sleep or a woman, but the rigid and hard feeling of being caged and trapped within a metal hole or coffin, screaming and clawing at a way to escape. The mood in the village was the same as it has always been when the weather was the way it was. Dark and gloomy, it reflected in every soul. The people walking on the streets had slight frowns and were fearing the worst when small droplets of water were painting the ground. The people and citizens were getting ready to scurry about to escape the oncoming downpour. Taking shelter where it was available and warm meals when able, the people of course wondered many times, over and over again, why Konoha, a once shining and warm place, was so cold and upset, like all its life was just gone in a second. No one came up with a clear conclusion as to why the weather was like it, but many times have they accepted that things were out of their control and dealt with it as best as they could. Though there were some things that nobody could accept, circumstances out of their control that they couldn't accept, no matter how their hearts told them they were wrong. One Sakura Haruno was currently packing her things ready to leave the village in favor of heading to the capital of the Land of Fire with the politician Inzi Husoku, a man of many talents and surprises. Inzi had journeyed to Konoha to speak urgently with Tsunade about several topics, including the incompetence of one very specific daio. Sakura was packing all the things she needed for the trip. Inzi had been kind enough to allow her to stay at his mansion where her whims could be catered to and her needs met. She had already knew what was expected of her. She was a delegate for Konoha, representing her village as the voice of the Hokage. To be truthful, Sakura was a bit nervous. She had no idea what to do. The last thing she expected to be was the delegate for Konoha. Couldn't Shikamaru do this job? No, he'll just be too lazy, troublesome. She wondered what kind of people she would meet, though she stuffed all that in the back of her mind as she knew exactly who she was meeting. Prissy nobles wearing fancy makeup and clothing of the most expensive tastes who were more concerned with the dirt on their shoes than the people they governed. Sakura thought that such a way of living was nothing more than repugnant, wasteful. However, there may be others like Inzi in the courts of the Land of Fire, maybe. The ones who cared for the well-being of others more than themselves, just hearts with the right intentions. Concerned with the stability and peace of their country and the lives of their people. She heard a knock on her door where she allowed the person in. When the door opened, it revealed a young man with an angular face with narrow eyes, though they were a little rounded. He had spiky chin-length caramel brown hair with sandy brown colored eyes and skin akin to marble. He was wearing a white kimono, with a black trim tied with an obi around his waist with motifs of wavy mists on the black trims, loose sleeves that hid his hands, which were tucked into said sleeves. Sakura smiled a little at seeing her new friend Inzi, who was escorting her to the capital. "Good morning or good afternoon, you can't really tell with this weather," said Inzi with a small pout as he looked out her window to see the dark gray clouds flying over the village. No, he was serious. You couldn't tell what time it was with such weather. That's why clocks were everyone's best friends in the village. No one went anywhere without a clock. "So are you nearly ready to leave?" questioned the handsome politician, to which Sakura merely nodded at him with a small grin, and some excitement oozing off her form. "I just have to check our equipment stocks for our ninja and finish some business at the hospital, then we can leave. Hopefully it won't be too long," spoke Sakura with an upbeat attitude, and Inzi nodded at her. "Well, when you're ready, meet me at the northern gate and we'll head for the capital. There'll be a carriage waiting for you. You'll know it when you see it," spoke Inzi as he left the room. As Sakura watched the door close, she turned back to packing her things. She had learned how to use basic fuinjutsu from Tenten. She wasn't a master, she didn't even consider herself an expert, but it was enough to get by. She knew the amazing things one can do with fuinjutsu, but she wasn't cut out for it. That was more Tenten's area of expertise, the self-proclaimed master of fuinjutsu with no equal except for Drea and Tsunade. As Sakura packed the last of her clothes she was going to need, she looked over to a picture sitting upon a small shelf and she smiled slightly at the figures in the picture. She picked up the picture and smiled ever more slightly where she stroked her finger across the whiskered face with the golden sun hair. This was one thing she couldn't part with, the only picture of him. Of Naruto. The picture was precious to her, above all else, her most valuable possession. Placing the picture in a random ceiling scroll, Sakura knew she had everything she needed, from tools to books and her vanity items. She then heard the sound of tapping, and being accustomed to the ever-falling rain in Konoha, she knew the tapping was coming from a different source. She looked outside her window to see a random Anbu member with a bird mask peering through her window. "Hokage-sama wishes to speak with you," spoke the Anbu before disappearing from sight altogether. Sakura raised her eyebrow in curiosity. Whenever Tsunade ever summoned her, it was always important, whether it regarded the village, the shinobi, or just her well-being. Sakura quickly placed her scrolls into a bag before leaving through the window, not bothering to mouth a goodbye to her parents as she wouldn't be returning home that day. Besides, she needed to be away from them, they had become too overbearing. When she made it to the Hokage's tower, she trudged through the halls with slight dabs of water on her clothing. She knocked on the door where Tsunade ushered her in to find her teacher's back, facing her as she stared out across the village as the rain now started to pour, drowning the village with the cloud's tears. Sakura couldn't see it, but Tsunade currently had a solemn visage on her face and a near-dead look in her eyes. "You wished to see me, Swan-sama," spoke Sakura softly, while her teacher didn't make any move nor did she turn to face her. Her eyes were locked on the village. She ruled over, seeing and inspecting all the droplets of the rain, watching the people run around seeking shelter from the onslaught of the saddened tears. "I've been wanting to discuss something with you, a topic I've been torn about. Since you're going to the capital, I thought it best that I tell you now, before the whole village knows," said Tsunade as she turned to face Sakura as the Hokage sat down in her office chair. "And this is about?" questioned Sakura as she was truly wondering what her leader was talking about. "Naruto and his heritage," spoke Swan solemnly. Sakura widened her eyes at her teacher, never taking her emerald eyes off her teacher's honey brown. "When my grandfather was still in power, he married the princess of the Uzumaki, Mito Uzumaki, to strengthen bonds between our clans and because they genuinely loved each other. During their prosperous and happy life together they had 2 children, a son and a daughter. Their son was my father. While their daughter traveled to Uzeshogakure, Umi Senju felt more of a greater connection to the Uzumaki than the Senju, and she wished to rejoin her people and to learn of Fuinjutsu from the greatest masters in the world, and because of her bright red hair, she was accepted without any qualms. She later married a man from the Uzumaki, a distant relative where the bloodline was diluted enough. They had 1 child together, a daughter. Her name was Kushina Uzumaki." "Tsunade-sama, you're not saying Mina," spoke Sakura with a gasp. Kushina later came to Konoha to be a shinobi of the village, where she married the man who would later become the Yondaime Hokage, and together, they had 1 child, a son, spoke Tsunade, her eyes drowning in sorrow. When Kushina came to the village, Tsunade had welcomed her with open arms, and the 2 were more like sisters than cousins. When Tsunade left the village, she kept in contact with her cousin via letters they would send to each other monthly, and the last letter she received was 1 month before the Kyuubi attack. The letter detailed Kushina's pregnancy to Tsunade, every little detail to what Kushina believed her child would be like, where the blonde woman thought she was a prophet as she was right about her child. It wasn't until later, a few months after the attack, did Tsunade learn that the child survived and was under the name Izumaki and had Minato's most prominent features. From ocean eyes to golden hair, it was like a huge neon light in her face. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze is the great-grandson of the Shadaime Hokage, through Hashirama's daughter, Naruto's maternal grandmother. So basically, Naruto was a prince within his own village, the blood of the Shadaime, the founder of the village, a member of the Senju clan, one of the founding clans, the most powerful, feared and respected clan in the world, treated like a plague and dirt on the ground, with fear only found around death and pain. Sakura then felt a tear trail down cheek as she took in the news. What she thought was right: humans were among the most cruel of beasts found in the world, as only beasts could treat other in such a way. And you let him suffer here alone, when you could have made him happy, given him a family to love, said Sakura with well-hidden animosity in her voice. Tsunade lowered her head in shame slightly, trying not to remember another of her mistakes she made in her unfortunate life. "You're just as disgraceful as the villagers," spat Sakura, who turned around and walked through the door, not offering her teacher a single glance, not believing she was worthy of such a thing. How come, when it came to family, Drea, Tsunade, they were the ones who allowed the ones they love suffer the most? It was just unforgivable. Sakura had never felt as much disgust for someone, but a rare few others. Tsunade, Drea, they could have at least visited Naruto, let him know that there were people out there that loved and cared for him, letting him know that he wasn't alone in his life, and to give him something to be happy for. Sometimes the simplest things can cause the most pain to someone. Tsunade just watched the empty space where Sakura was standing. Everything her apprentice said was true, she didn't deny, she couldn't. She let Naruto suffer like a sheep in a den of wolves, defenseless, alone, suffering. She was too obsessed about her miserable life that she was inadvertently making another's miserable. Drea was the same, although he had good reasons to be away, tracking Orochimaru and keeping tabs on the Akatsuki, but he could have at least visited the golden blonde. She allowed the last scion of the Senju clan to die. Maybe if she kept him in that program, things would have been different. Sakura was at the supply depot in the village, where Konoha handled all its tools, weapons, storage and accessories used for the missions of the ninja of the village. This was one of the pink-haired Kunoichi's duties, as tedious as it was. She quickly picked up a clipboard which had the list of stock within the building. She was too focused on her duties, trying to bottle up her anger over her teacher. She just wanted to get the day over and done with, then leave with Inzi for the Fire Country capital. She didn't want to talk about her feelings, it never got her anywhere. Any rage bottling up in her she was attempting to hold back, restrain any violent tendencies that she inherited from Sinead, because she could quite possibly level the building and a few others. But she just needed to be away from everything. Okay, 30 hip pouches for the Anbu, then I'm done, said the pink-haired girl, but she noticed something was wrong. Huh. 31. Where did that come from? Said Sakura as she picked up the stray hip pouch that was a bit away from the rest. Deciding that it was not important, Sakura placed the hip pouch next to the others. Later a unit of the Anbu came by and picked up the hip pouches, transporting them to the Anbu headquarters. When the pouches arrived and were unattended, the Silent Shadow had achieved the next phase of its goal. Sitting within the storeroom, dark and quiet, not a sound, did the next phase begin. The stray pouch which Sakura had picked up literally started moving. The zipper of the hip pouch opened up, and out came a slender, supple leg with black leather armor on it, planting itself firmly on the ground, where another leg with the same black leather armor appeared. Then came the rest of the person's body. The person was wearing a full-body black bodysuit with dark gray square-like shapes patterns along the arms and chest. Silver leather armor that covered the front of the torso down to the legs, and protecting the person's back, held together by bands on the person's sides and a ring band, connecting it to the neck. The person was wearing long figure-fitting boots with white lines that went up to the waist, which stuck snugly to their body, held together by two bands around the person's waist, black gloves that extended from the fingers to the forearms with white lines, and a hood pinned to silver armor which was currently pulled down. The person was a woman, appearing to be in her mid-teens to late teens, although she had the body that would suggest otherwise. She was pale-skinned with long pale lavender hair which was partially tied up in the back in a long bun and fell behind her shoulders, while a strand falls between her eyes, whose irises and pupils were milky white. Her hair was also parted to the left of her head with a blue, star-shaped hair clip. All in all, she looked as if something had fallen from the heavens. Reaching back into the hip pouch, she pulled out a pair of sai, the weapons that someone crafted for her, and strapped them to her sides. She then left the room without ever moving her head. Walking around the Anbu headquarters, she paid no mind to anything around her, her steps not making the slightest tap, her pale eyes never moving. Her only objective, to reach the lower levels of the headquarters. Turning around on the next corner, she made her way through the doors of an elevator, though had some trouble to which button she had to press to make it go down, and while in the elevator she was frustrated over the fact she didn't know which button to press. Only when she scraped her finger against each button did she realize where her destination was, and quickly took off towards route headquarters. When she made it to the headquarters and stepped out of the elevator, not inspecting her surroundings or not caring for them, she continued on towards her target, while the hidden route agents in the area kept watching her through their eye holes before one disappeared to warn his master. Sitting in his room in the dark with only a single candle for light was Danzo Shimura, the shinobi no Yami, darkness of the shinobi. Sipping on some tea, enjoying its taste and savoring its scent, his only revealed eye squinted shut, while his form was rigid and ready to strike on the moment's notice. He was currently thinking about a certain thorn in his side, one that had been jabbing at him far too long. To Kurufu, he wondered if the man would return. Well, it's not that he really had a choice in the matter. Obito wanted to handle Takurufu, put him in his place, permanently. But Danzo needed him alive. He needed the man's tricky mind to find something he desired. And Danzo wasn't one to let a potential asset go to waste. Takurufu would bow to him once again. Danzo's brooding was interrupted when one of his agents appeared by his side and whispered something in his ear, making Danzo's interest peak. He never got to say anything else before the agent disappeared. So she's returned, it was only a matter of time, thought Danzo as he sipped on his tea again before opening a drawer from his desk and pulling out a decorated box where the old shinobi opened it, revealing red velvet cloth, and sitting idly in the cloth was a golden decorated control device that looked like a lighter with a red button on top. As the lavender-haired girl walked through the headquarters of Root, she was fully aware that she was being trailed by Danzo's dogs. She could smell their stench a mile away, ironic since Root prided itself on secrecy that she was able to detect the shinobi following her. As she was walking down a hallway, did two members of Root appear from nowhere and readied themselves to face her as she kept briskly walking forward, never stopping and not concerned with the threat the two shinobi in front of her presented. Picking up her pace, she jogged at the Root agents as they stood their ground. One of them tried to aim a punch at her, but she ducked under it and slid across the ground past the agent, where she threw a ceiling tag where it landed close by to the Root agent. A second later, the seal was unleashed as lightning arced about and shocked the Root agent, who was knocked out from the electric currents running through his body. Not wasting any of her speed, she rushed at the other agent, where she jumped in mid-air and flipped in forward and landed on the Root agent and kicking him in the face at the same time, where his mask was broken and he was respectively knocked out. She stood up to her full height, her foot still on the shinobi's face, and began walking again, leaving the two agents where they were. Another Root agent appeared from a corner, where she sprinted in response and slid across the ground, kicking the Root agent's knees, breaking them in the process, and continued sliding where she was behind the agent and fell into a predator-like stance, in time for her to feel the presence of another agent rushing around a corner. Jumping to her feet, she vaulted over the downed Root agents, the one with the broken knee, using him as a springboard, and locked her legs around the oncoming agent's neck and with great strength, used her legs to throw him to the ground headfirst, knocking him out. She then flipped in the air and performed an axe kick on the Root soldier's head, the one with the broken leg, knocking him out, and kept walking to her objective, and soon felt the presence of two more agents around the corner. Pulling out two pellets from her armor, she threw them around the corner, in front of the incoming agents, which exploded in their faces, stunning in the process, and for a ringing sensation to fill their ears. Sliding across the ground once more, she kicked one of the agents off his feet and punched him in the face when he hit the ground, knocking him out, and then turning to the other agent, where she planted her foot on his front leg, and used it as a springboard and backflipped in the air, kicking the agent in the face and knocking him out, where he landed on his back with an audible thud. Feeling the presence of four more agents coming at her from behind, she turned around and rushed at the agents. The first agent rushed at her and attempted to punch her, only for the girl to duck under his punch and struck him in the gut, making him cough a little, only to receive another punch to the chin, stunning him, and then felt an arm curling around his head as he was put into a headlock. The second agent charged at her, but she kicked him in the knee, breaking it, making him fall to the ground with only a single knee to support himself, where he was kicked in the chin, stunning him like the first agent, and then he felt his neck encircled by her 2 feet, where in a swift motion, she flipped the two of them with great speed and strength and smashed them against the ground headfirst, knocking them out. The third Root agent whipped out a kunai, meant as a way of defense and intimidation. Only it didn't work, as he went to slash the lavender-haired girl, only for her to block his hand with her own, stopping the slash. She then gripped her attacker's hand, pulling him to the ground on his knees, and then being punched in the face by a palm strike, which brought him back onto his feet, but it was short-lived as he was kicked in the knee, shattering upon impact, falling to the ground, where he was kneed in the face, knocking him out. The last agent came rushing at her, however, she was prepared for him. The Root attempted to kick her in the face, but she instead grabbed the foot, kicked the other agent's foot, losing his balance and then kneeing him in the place where the sun doesn't shine. If the agent wasn't knocked out from that, he wouldn't be getting back up anytime soon. She then felt the presence of one more agent coming up from in front of her. She charged at the shinobi, who barely had any time to counter because of her speed. She slid on the ground and kicking at his foot, making the ninja lose his footing and topple over, where the next thing he saw was a foot planting itself firmly in his face, knocking him out. Shen then started walking again at a brisk pace. A few minutes later, she encountered more resistance in the form of 3 soldiers. Bringing her hands together, ninja wire appeared between her fingers, and she held the tough as steel wire as she blocked a slash from a kunai which originated from another agent. She then kicked the shinobi in the stomach, stunning him, where she continued by delivering a punch to the face, then one to the stomach, again, and she then spun around, wrapping the wire around the ninja's neck, where she began to choke him and now held the wire solely in her left hand. She then ducked in time to avoid a punch from another agent who unprofessionally fell to the ground after he tried to punch her. She then brought up her right arm to block a punch from another Root agent and with quick reactions tied the wire around his hand, stomped her knee on his bound arm, bringing the agent and the one who was grasping for air from the wire around his neck, plummeting to the ground, and punched the man with the bound hand, knocking him out, while the other one with wire around his neck fell into unconsciousness from lack of air. The one who was picking himself up off the ground after the failed attack stood up to begin his assault once again. The milky-eyed girl, however, didn't leave him time to react as she launched herself at him, coiling around and locking her legs around his neck, choking and stunning him, then planting her feet on the ground and throwing him over her shoulder, headfirst to the ground. Another agent ran around the corner and tried to stab her in the back only for her to block his arm, put him into an arm lock, making him yelp in pain, bringing his arm up again out of the lock maneuver into tight quarters, elbowed him in the face, causing him to fall to his knees only for her to roundhouse kick him in the back of the head, knocking him. Getting back onto her feet again, she walked towards her location with a slew of unmoving bodies behind, and without even a sweat on her form. She then pulled out a canister from her armor as another agent came rounding out from the corner only for her to spray him in the face with pepper spray. Unfortunately, he wasn't wearing a mask as she made her way through Root headquarters. When she finally made it to the specific area in the headquarters, she could sense her target on the other side, not moving, but waiting for her specifically. She had waited a long time for this. To have her answers, to learn the truth. Danzo meanwhile was sipping on his tea when he saw his sliding door starting to be frozen in frost. When he breathed he could clearly see his breath as if it was a light in his face. More and more the sliding doors froze, cracking and being encased in ice. She was always one of his best. Before long the entire door was blanketed in the solid water where it shattered within a second and the shards fell to the ground. On the other side, he could the woman who was responsible for it. Standing there, her milky white eyes peering into him, her twin says ready to strike against him, he could see that the sudden drop in temperature didn't affect her at all. It was more like it was giving her an air of enlightenment, a breath of strength. She then took careful steps towards the aged shinobi, who was unafraid of her as he stared at her blankly through his squinted eye. "I believe I need a new door," spoke Danzo with that careful tongue of his. The woman stopped in her stride as she stood before him, not too close and not too far away, a perfect distance for talking and killing. "Still, I believed it was only a matter of time before you came skulking back here. Tetsunko. That's not my name, it never was. And I'm not quite as dead as you thought, and a new door won't be the only thing you'll need in a moment," spoke Tetsunko as a sneer marred her face in disgust at the man in front of her. "Oh, yes, I heard you have a new name, the one he gave you. Kyoku, was it? I can't seem to remember," spoke Danzo in a condescending manner, making the woman named Kyoku grit her teeth at the old badger. "You sent him to his death. Just like every one of your tools that were no longer useful. Just like me," said Kyoku as she pointed one of her says at the root commander, making him almost smirk at her attempt of intimidation. "I did, he was a loose end, a broken weapon, a dysfunctional tool but a dangerous device. The secrets he knew could have jeopardized Konoha and crippled us. I couldn't allow such a menace to live. It was all for the good of the village," replied Danzo flippantly, making Kyoku tighten her grip on her says in anger. "And now, look at where we are, you who crawled through the mud, not belonging in this world or anywhere. Until I found you. I gave you purpose, resolve and above of all, I allowed you to live. And this is how you repay me, baring your fangs and claws at me in defiance. You did give me purpose, but he gave me something worth fighting for," responded Kyoku, seemingly explaining her reasons. "But we both know he's not really dead. He's like a cockroach after all. No matter how many times you flush him down the toilet, he always finds a way to crawl back up. So where is he? Astute as usual, even for someone with your condition," said Danzo, referring to something the girl had all her life, her eyes. Her blind eyes. "You only survived in this world because of your adaptability. That was why you were useful, that and your Keki Genkai, which I still wish to harvest even now," continued Danzo, with Kyoku not caring in the least, for his words were empty and shallow. "Now as to where he is, I'm afraid I cannot say, other than one of his usual stops is in Amigakure. He tends to fly around, never leaving a trail or clue behind. If you just so happen to tug on his tail, I'm sure you'll find him. But it seems as though you won't be having your heartfelt reunion soon." With those words Danzo pulled out the decorated control device from inside his robes. However, Kyoku didn't flinch in the slightest at his actions. "Though before he left, he did leave me several helpful parting gifts. I'm sure even you will be able to recognize it also," said Danzo as he pushed the red button on the control device, where something opened up behind him. A cabinet behind him opened up. Where it did, silvery mist leaked through the doors, coating the ground within it. Kyoku took a step back in fear at what she was feeling, a powerful source of chakra unlike anything. Said source of chakra was a black triangular prism in shape, with glowing blue lines and cracks along its form. "Girl, you should know, I always have an ace up my sleeve." Then Danzo pushed the red button where chakra in the shape of lightning arced about from the prism, surging forward past the bandaged man towards Kyoku, where it struck multiple points in her body, shocking her and making her scream and moan in abject pain, where she fell to the ground, clutching her head and scraping her fingers against the ground. Danzo then stopped in his assault as the lightning stopped altogether, where she seemed to gasp in relief as her form was steaming from the effects of the prism. No matter what, whenever you think you have the better of me, I happen to be 3 steps ahead, and yet you foolishly believe that you had any chance. Replied Danzo as he put the control device down and poured some more tea for himself. How do you have the Zencho? Questioned Kyoku as her face was still buried in the ground, not actually needing to look up at Danzo. Danzo smirked at her, believing himself to be superior to all beings. That is something you'll never know, as you will be too busy dying. Spoke Danzo as he picked up the device and pushed the red control device, again where even more lightning struck Kyoku, where she was able to push herself onto her knees in time only to be struck by more lightning. However, she clutched her head in pain again and she felt like her entire body was being burned from the inside out. The pain didn't feel like lightning, it was more like fire, burning her from within, and waves smashing itself against her body. She then fell to the ground again, screaming and moaning in agony. It was only for a few seconds where her body became limp and unflinching. My dear, you will have to be one of my greatest failures, but you still have some use. Your body will still have your Keki Genna, which I can use even now. Danzo pressed the control device a third time and was met with the same result, as the girl was rolling on the floor screaming to her heart's content. Kyoku, fighting through the pain no matter how much it burned, knew she only had a few seconds to live. Pressing her right hand against the ground, black ink appeared from the spot and quickly swallowed her up as her body turned into ink and she was gone. Danzo, seeing that she had escaped using a fuinjutsu of the highest caliber, frowned at the spot where she disappeared. Assembling his root agents, he had them scour the entire village for the lavender-haired girl, intent on silencing her. In a dark alley within Konoha, black ink started appearing from the ground and soon an inky form sprouted from the black liquid, revealing Kyoku, whose body was smoldering from the effects of the Zencho. Picking herself up and using a wall for support was the lavender-haired girl, breathing heavily. She knew everything about the Zencho, a weapon made of nothing but fuinjutsu, created by a master in its art. She knew that she was lucky to live, as most who felt the effects of the Zencho never got up off the ground. But she knew that without the Maber, the Zencho wouldn't be used to its full potential. If Danzo had the Zencho, there's no telling what kind of damage he could do to the world, as the Zencho above all was so powerful that it could kill Biju and their deaths would be permanent. Never would they revive again. She had to find the Maber. Without it, the Zencho's powers would be greatly hindered, and also the Maber was the only thing that could destroy the Zencho. But the thing is, where did he hide it? It had to have been in a place where no one could look for it. A dark place where no light was to be found. Knowing him, he would have set up traps and securities to protect it. He always did have a flair for the dramatics. The thing is, she didn't know whether or not he removed the location of the Maber from his mind. Did he remember? Or was that another of his failsafes? She needed to start somewhere, so might as well start at the hospital. Not to ascertain its location, no, but to have a better understanding of his mind and to place herself in his shoes, trying to think where he would hide the Maber from those who sought it. When she finally made it to the hospital, she went in through the only way ninjas actually use, the window. Walking through the halls without a care in the world, not afraid of any doctors or wounded shinobi, within its confines she had little fear. She was a great actor, after all. She had to find a certain medical file, and for someone to read it for her. Despite being born blind, Kyoku had a natural ability that rendered her blindness all but mute. By continually releasing her chakra as pulses through the ground and around her, Kyoku could perceive the world around her that no other human was capable of. It acted as a sonar, relaying anything that the pulse hits, basically seeing the world with her chakra. She could even detect ants crawling across the ground that others might not be aware of. Though this ability did have limitations, only minor in retrospective, she couldn't discern much detail from the things she could see, such as facial features or written words on paper. Say if you gave her a coin, she would only see the coin and not the detail on said coin. She couldn't even see color. But this ability did have one weakness, since she had to release chakra to see. Sensor-type shinobi could find her easily and quickly, but she had ways to skirt around any of her would-be trackers. Finally making it to a room she thought was the file storage room, or whatever doctors called it. Going through the door, she could sense the multiple metal cabinets containing the files. Placing her hand on the cabinets, she released a pulse of chakra that surged through the cabinets. She was looking for the largest one. Finding the file, quickly turning to her left and pulling out a cabinet and yanked the largest one out of there. She could only hope she had gotten the right file, as she couldn't read or write. The file was so big you couldn't fit your hand around it, and it was heavy too. Written on a tag upon the file in big bold letters was Naruto Uzumaki. Kyoku, sensing someone coming, hid in the shadows of the room and strapped the file to her armor using some ninja wire. using her special sense to watch the person. When the person entered, it was a girl around her age, wearing a vest-like top with an apron skirt, gloves, low-heel calf-high boots, shorts, elbow protectors. She had shoulder-length hair with a forehead protector acting as a hairband. Other than that, Kyoku couldn't discern any other features of the girl. And she wasn't a sensor type, lucky for Kyoku. The girl in reality was Sakura, who was finishing up her duties at the hospital, the last task she found the most tedious, checking that all recorded files were in their respective cabinets. And she was, of course, given a list of patients in the hospital, so she knew that any files that were missing were of those of the current patients. Sakura, going through every cabinet, was quite literally bored out of her mind, like any child that had lost their toy. She was the best medic in the village, second only to Tsunade, and yet she was stuck doing these chores. Opening another cabinet, Sakura noticed that something was different about it. For one, it was missing a large chunk, and no two patients in the hospital had their files taken from that certain cabinet. Checking the cabinet number, and then checking the number on her own list, Sakura obviously knew that there was an irregularity. She recounted all of the files and knew that the only one that was missing was patient 67, or otherwise known as Naruto Uzumaki. Narrowing her eyes and suddenly sensing a presence, if she focused enough she could feel the pulses of chakra within the room. Placing her hand on her shuriken holster, Sakura threw 2 shuriken at a shadow in the room where the figure hiding in the room ducked from the attack. When the person entered the light, Sakura saw it was a beautiful lavender-haired girl with milky white eyes, wearing black and silver leather armor. Not wanting to let the intruder escape and not recognizing the girl, nor was she wearing a headband, denoting her loyalty to any village, Sakura attacked to stop the intruder in her steps. The pink-haired girl attacked the lavender-haired girl with a straightforward punch, to which Kyoku moved her head, letting it pass by. Kyoku, seeing an opportunity, double-punched Sakura, the apprentice of Tsunade, making her cough hoarsely from the attack. Sakura, not one to be used as a punching bag, threw kunai at Kyoku, where the blind girl dodged them with grace and elegance, her pale eyes never moving, nor having any need to move. Needing to escape so their battle wouldn't draw the attention of the root agents after her, Kyoku resorted to her use of her Keki Genkai. She wouldn't kill the pink-haired girl unless she had to. She avoided death as much as possible because of her pacifist nature, though knocking them out and breaking their bones she had no problem with. Hyotan, Hakuren Ice Release, White Ripple, as she finished her set of hand seals and held out her palm as ice particles built up around her hand and unleashed an avalanche of frigid cold air that flash froze anything caught within it, and causing the air itself to be tinged in frost and the room to be frozen in ice. Sakura, seeing the technique, was able to take cover by uplifting a table in time to stop herself from being frozen. However, she was rubbing her shoulders and her teeth were chittering with the tips of her fingers and the corners of her eyes to have small amounts of ice on them, while her face had gone pale and her lips had a soft tint of blue. Like that day, just like Haku. Recalled Sakura as she remembered the ice release user very well from her first C-rank mission. She released some breath into her hands where she could see her breath clearly, and her form was shaking even more as if her blood was freezing within her body. Ice Release, a Keki Genkai, which only meant that the lavender-haired girl was related to Haku. Stealing her resolve, Sakura leapt up from behind her cover to face the girl, ready to fight her one again. But Sakura saw no sign of the girl, not even her presence. Her body was shaking as she took a few steps back, careful not to slip on the ice and lose her footing. She was unaware of the shadow leaping behind her, holding ninja wire between their hands. And in a second, Sakura could feel tight wire suffocating her, latching itself around her neck. Her hands going up to the wire in an attempt to loosen their hold, she could see the long lavender hair of the girl, who was now trying to kill her, but she was unaware that Kyoku was using extreme methods to knock her out. Still, if there was one thing Sakura inherited from her master, Tsunade, was her contempt for losing. Her strength coming back to her, Sakura moved her body and slammed Kyoku into a frozen wall, which made the blind girl grunt in pain, but didn't break her grip on the wire. Sakura tried the tactic again, and rammed her into another wall, with Kyoku moaning in pain and her grip on the wire loosening just a little. Sakura, using her remaining natural strength, jumped backwards so to land on her back, but instead landed on Kyoku, who felt the full brunt of the attack where her grip finally broke and was momentarily stunning her, and Kyoku had to hand it to the girl. She was resourceful and lasted longer than most against her. Sakura, taking advantage of Kyoku's dazed state, charged up large amounts of chakra into her fist and took the opportunity to strike Kyoku where she was. Just a single strike was all that was needed to end the ice release user's life, for Sakura had dubbed her to be too dangerous to escape. Kyoku, sensing her opponent's powerful attack, forced her body to move out of the way, and just in time as Sakura slammed her fist against the ground, causing it to be destroyed from the impact and causing the two girls to fall through the floor. into a hallway below where many of the doctors, nurses and patients gasped in shock and surprise at seeing Sakura laying on the ground with a beautiful girl, not too far away with debris, ice and files upon them with small pebbles to cake their hair and scratches on their forms. Both girls moaning at the pain from falling through a floor and having debris falling on top of them. Did they fidget a little to get back the feeling in their limbs and bodies? Kyoku really had to compliment the girl. Other than a few others, no one had really given Kyoku a challenge. It's not that she was arrogant, it was the fact that there weren't many people that Kyoku could test her power against, not that she would test her power out. Lifting some rubble off of her form, Kyoku stood on her knees and she could feel the pink-haired girl glaring daggers into her as Sakura also lifted some rubble off her. Feeling an escape nearby from her chakra pulsing through the hospital, Kyoku could feel that one of the walls was weak and would lead outside if it was broken. She couldn't use the same means of escape as the time she ran from Danzo in the Zensho. She could only use it once as she didn't have the chakra reserves to use that jutsu again, so she devised a plan for her escape. Kyoki knew she had to goad her opponent to escape, but the thing is, she didn't know what to say. It's not like she could insult the girl she was fighting as she didn't know what she looked like. Being blind had its ups and downs. Then it came to her, she was blind. Man, being blind is good, at least I don't have to see your ugly face, spoke Kyoku, which made something click in Sakura's mind as the pink-haired girl stood to full height, and Kyoku did the same also, although the insults made Sakura forget that how would a blind girl know what ugly even meant? Well, it doesn't matter if I can see, as your ugly face would have made me blind anyway. Then red a tick mark appeared on Sakura's forehead as dark flames whipping around her. I mean, your parents must have been good looking, you must be what's left. Die whore, yelled Sakura as she charged at Kyoku like a rampaging bull with a bloodthirsty look in their eyes. Sakura kneaded up chakra in her fist ready to hit Kyoku, while the lavender-haired girl merely retreated towards a weak wall, waiting for Sakura to hit. Narrowly dodging the chakra-enhanced fist that flew past her head, Sakura's fist smashed against the wall, breaking two into many pieces, and within a split second Kyoku pushed Sakura away and jumped through the hole in the wall towards her freedom. When she landed on the outside of the hospital, she was immediately surrounded by drones from Root as the rain of the village pelted their bodies. One of the Root agents pressed his fingers into a wireless communicator connected via his ear. Orders, Danzo-sama, asked the Root captain to his leader. The 13th order, responded the commander of Root, to which the Anbu captain nodded and signaled his fellow comrades. Bind her, ordered the captain, to which all of the Root agents nodded and unsealed chains from scrolls upon their waists. Kyoku, sensing something was wrong, went to attack her would-be captors by taking out her sais. When the Root agents threw them at her, she used her amazing abilities to detect the sound of the clinking of the chains. However, Root was nothing if not adaptable. They knew they could not capture with the tactic they were using and instead threw all the chains at once. When Kyoku felt the chains coming, she deflected as many as she could, but was overwhelmed by the chains, numbers which bound her legs, arms and around her neck, where she fell to her knees and dropped her sais at the constricting feeling. She, of course, the near unbreakable spirit, she was tried to fight back, but instead of binding her, the chains were whipped against her body, possibly as a sign of submission or just for the amusement of the Root agents. Sakura meanwhile watched all of it, from the large hole she made in the hospital. She didn't know whether to feel or horrified or glad at what was happening, but she knew that the girl didn't deserve to be whipped with chains as if she was a slave. She really didn't know her motivations. She didn't know whether or not she was truly an enemy. To be technical, she was the one that attacked the blind girl first, and the attack merely acted out in self-defense. And the pink-haired girl could see the supposed Anbu captain approaching the girl. When Kyoku felt the steps of the Root agent, she could sense a large buildup of chakra in the Root captain's hand, chakra which became overwhelmingly foul. She knew this feeling everywhere he developed it. She knew all of his seals, his cursed seals, everything. She never expected or believed Danzo would resort to something so extreme, a fate worse than death. The 13th order. Upon the Root captain's bare hand was a black seal of 3 rows of evenly spaced rectangles and a long rectangle on the bottom. Kyoku was visibly sweating and shaking at the feeling of the seal. She tried to fight her bonds. However, it was in vain as they stood there ground against her, thrashing, almost as if they were trees rooted in the ground. She knew that once this seal was placed, it was impossible for them to break it, as it is literally branded into their skin and burned into their mind. It was a failsafe for any Root shinobi who goes rogue. In a last-ditch attempt at freedom, Kyoku merely began screaming and shouting obscene things. She had enough chakra for a few jutsu, but with her hands bound she couldn't form the seals to escape. Sakura, who merely stood as a witness, could hear the near cries of pain coming from the girl. Whatever was happening, she knew it wasn't under the orders of her Hokage. No, stop. yelled Sakura, which made the Anbu captain look up at her as she was about to touch Kyoku's forehead. Seeing the pause in his step, Kyoku took the offensive and bit into the shinobi's fingers, eliciting a scream from the man as Kyoku's chomped down on the appendages, and while the captain tried to pull his fingers out from her mouth where they were soon bleeding. Kyoku also noticed that Sakura had also gained the attention of the rest of the root soldiers. Obviously they lacked discipline at following some of their orders. Tugging on the chains that bound her arms, Kyoku brought her hands together to form a seal. Hyotan, Oringushimo 4, Ice Release, Howling Frost Touch, said Kyoku mentally as she gripped the chains, and along the metal frost and ice started coating their form, making them brittle and breakable, where the chains soon shattered and Kyoku formed another set of seals ready for her escape. Hyotan, Juaku Ice Release, White Tree, and at her feet the ground became glazed over with frost, tightly being encased in ice where the ground was literally gleaming and sparkling because of the light from the sun. It spread so quickly that the root agents were frozen over in frost as they now appeared like statues made of ice. Then a violent small snowstorm as snowflakes danced around Kyoku's form, and soon she vanished from sight entirely. Elsewhere, in an octangular room made of metal, with small rectangular windows that allowed barely any light in the room, were two figures, one sitting on a bed in the corner of the room and the other clutching at a wound on his side as blood leaked from his mouth as he was embroiled in a staring contest with the other man. After a short battle with their enemy's minions, the two had traded blows with the other, with the blonde man coming out on top because of his superior skill and prowess. The black-haired man had never seen such growth from a person such as him before. A little over 2 years ago, he was nothing more than a bug compared to him. Now the black-haired man felt like he was comparing himself, a bug, to a mountain touching the sky and clouds. The black man was among the best and brightest his village had ever produced, and yet even with all his years of experience he was still powerless against the blonde. The two men were respectively Itachi Uchiha, the fallen heir of the near-extinct Uchiha clan, and Ryukei's, or known by his real name as Naruto Uzumaki, son of the Yondaime Hokage, scion of the Senju clan and Madara's student. Naruto and Itachi had faced each other in combat in Imigakure, when they were surrounded by soldiers of Root, a training division of the Anbu Black Ops led by the extremist, Danzo Shimura, a man both had history with. Now they were staring at the other, neither moving their eyes. "Itachi, stop with the genjutsu. It's getting rather old," spoke Naruto, which made Itachi almost smirk as his form dispersed into a murder of crows, and in its place was the dead body of a root agent with a sizable gash on their side, the killing blow. Naruto then looked up to see Itachi standing on the other side of the room with his Sharingan in full effect. "I've been searching for you for a long time, Itachi. I was rather beginning to think that you didn't want to be found. I was beginning to think that you didn't want to be dead," replied the Uchiha with his unflinching face that betrayed nothing in his eyes. Naruto merely stared back with that same look before sending chakra into his left eye, ready to attack the Uchiha. Itachi, sensing the chakra building up in Naruto's eye, was prepared to react when seeing the changing patterns in the Uzumaki's eyes. This proved his theory that Naruto was able to awaken the next stage of the Sharingan, the Mangekyo Sharingan, or perhaps he evolved his eye even further. Itachi didn't know what to think of the man in front of him. Itachi knew that he was more dangerous than anybody he however met, more than Nagato, more than Madara. For someone like him to exist was near unbelievable. How could he amass so much power in so short a time? It was almost as if he was connected to a battery that was supplying him power and skill. Itachi soon saw Naruto's Mangekyo pattern. It was 3 sides with the back of the blades having points upon them, and around the pupil was a pinwheel pattern, and his pupil, instead of being a circle, was a 3-pointed shuriken. Itachi was ready to move before Naruto turned his head, looking at the dead root agent. "Amaterasu," spoke Naruto mentally as black flames ignited at his point of vision, which happened to be the root agent's body, where within a few minutes the flames encompassed and consumed the agent's body, where all you could see were black flames and the flickering of fire. Itachi relaxed himself slightly at the actions, but didn't make another move than watching his enemy. "So you have been alive all this time?" stated Itachi, to which Naruto raised his head, where his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan pattern disappeared, replaced with his standard Sharingan. The Uchiha didn't know how Naruto could have gained his clan's Keki Genkai and to skillfully wield it without being an Uchiha. It boggled the mind. "Not all this time, but yes, I was alive, and you obviously believed I didn't die, unlike the rest of the world who really believe I'm dead, all the while celebrating the circumstances that involve said murder, and I prefer to have it stay that way, as you could say. Naruto Uzumaki is dead," spoke Naruto as he watched the black flames die down as it reduced the body to nothing but ashes. "But the boundaries of life and death can be easily blurred. Perhaps I merely faked my death, perhaps I really did die, maybe someone died in my place. It makes no difference, as I am here now." And once again it was out of that village's control. Their contradictions of me being a demon was childish, as if a demon was crafted from that night of horror, battle and death. They believed I was evil from the moment I was birthed. The thing they don't understand is that evil is never born, it is something that is created and festered within us all, but I myself believe that evil is a labeled term when someone disagrees with the ideals of another. So, you really do have no intention of returning to the village? Spoke Itachi with his neutral face in full sway. He had to know, even if Naruto killed his friend would he still have just a sliver of loyalty towards Konoha, but Itachi carried the wisdom of a Hokage. He knew that Naruto might have opposite feelings to what Itachi was inquiring. Village. Why would I return to a place that clearly doesn't want me around, nor do I feel any emotional attachment to? It's ludicrous to believe that I will defend and fight for a place that has done nothing but damn me. There, I was a fox among dogs and sheep, unwanted, not recognized, but now I'm a wolf, and I have still found nothing to satisfy me. I won't destroy Konoha, it's not like the buildings desired to hurt or wound me. Responded Naruto. So you truly do feel nothing? Continued Itachi as he stared blankly at Naruto, who gave him the same look. However, Naruto lowered his head to the ground in contemplation, wondering if what Itachi said was true. Did he really have emotions, buried within him and not erased from his being? Or was it as Itachi said, cold, empty? He wasn't too sure. Whenever he thought about this subject, which was many times, he always pictured Konan. He didn't know why, but he always saw her when thinking of his emotions, and accompanying her was always another person with her. He wasn't too sure of it, but he could remember someone. Naruto then looked back up at Itachi, his blood-red eyes carrying their emptiness within him. Nothing at all, replied Naruto, which didn't earn even a single facial expression from the fallen Uchiha. But what are your plans? What do you desire most? Questioned Itachi, never moving anything other than his lips. That which will sever everyone from their fate, a state of utter bliss, where everything will be yours and nothing will be everything. You won't be bound by chains or be carrying crowns, an infinite dream. Replied Naruto with his Sharingan eyes glowing a little at the thought of it. Make no mistake, Itachi. War is coming, with all its glory and all its horror, and even you will be trampled before it. We'll see about that, but Naruto, you know have the power to change the world without war. Join a righteous cause, fight for the people. Join Konoha, and things will be different. Just set aside your hatred and rejoin Konoha, they can change. Pleaded Itachi in his neutral manner, attempting to reason with the blonde man before him, to set aside all the things plaguing the world and himself. I don't join. I lead. Spoke Naruto as he stood up off the bed to his full height. And I will lead this world into a new era. Every living thing in the world will bow before my eye, or else they will die. Obedience or oblivion, that is why I fight. Even with your eyes you're still blind to the possibilities of this world. You once wanted to be Hokage and you wanted the wisdom that came with the title, the ideals you strived for. A Hokage must see the good in all things, no matter how far they have fallen, and now all you see is what you wish to see. A Hokage must weigh the good and evil of their actions upon their shoulders and still must adhere to his ideals. Rebuked Itachi, to which made Naruto narrow his eyes at the man. Let the priests argue over good and evil. They can live in my new world or they can die in their old one. Argued Naruto, to which his Sharingan began glowing so much, you could nearly see steam being projected from the orbs. Perhaps. But you won't live to see it. Spoke Itachi as he took out a kunai and rushed over to stab Naruto with amazing speed. Naruto merely lifted his right hand and channeled chakra into his right eye. Itachi's kunai then found itself a centimeter away from its intended target, and the Uchiha found his neck being crushed by the blonde's right hand. Please. Our petty conflicts mean nothing. Spoke Naruto as he clutched Itachi's throat some more as he subdued him with Kamionaneo, Tekken Seibutsu Senshukoti, Iron Fist subjugated one of the Tyrant Emperor. Itachi could feel his body fighting against where his body then twirled the kunai in his hand, holding it in a reverse grip as he felt a screaming voice in the back of his mind, but Itachi was stunned as he didn't know how he fell under the effects of Naruto's eyes. He then recounted the only moment where the two locked eyes with each other. When they passed each other by on the industrial tower. A storm is coming that cannot be stopped. His arm then prepared to stab himself in the stomach, most likely to end his life. Itachi, sending his chakra into his eyes, thought of the only way to escape from Naruto's hold, and soon enough Itachi's arm moved to stab him in the stomach, where he would die a slow death. Fitting that we should face oblivion together. Never. yelled Itachi as he activated his own respective Mangekyo Sharingan and fought the sway of Naruto's Kamionaneo, where he twirled the kunai back to a normal, where he swung the weapon at Naruto, then jumped back where a red flame-like aura was starting to swirl around him. And Naruto merely looked on, in shock at someone being able to resist Kamionaneo, and attempted to strike him, while under its sway. But with shock washing off him and his eyes steeling themselves, did he break from his stupor and awe at Itachi. But he then felt a warm trickle run down his neck and stain his black cloak, where he looked down to find blood upon the torso of his cloak, originating from a diagonal cut that started near his ear and ending near his Adam's apple, where it was oozing red liquid, while Naruto merely widened his eyes at the implication, and then turned his eyes back on Itachi as he stared at the Uchiha. Fate cannot be changed. The end comes. And when it finds me, spoke Naruto as he used his natural healing ability Oshie no Shudoin, teachings of the monastery, to heal the cut which was replaced with a scar. I shall embrace it, at last. Although Naruto was a little surprised to find that there was a scar left behind, he surmised that Itachi must have used a very incomplete Susanoo to temporarily resist the control of Kamionaneo, therefore the red flaming aura around him, and to augment his power. It was the only viable reason as to why it left a scar. And he had to congratulate him. He was the second person to leave him with a scar, the first being his younger brother Sasuke, when he killed him at the Valley of the End. Naruto then approached the iron bars that separated him from the door, and opened them up, where he placed both of his fists on the octangular door, where it shifted opened. Tell me why I shouldn't kill you right now? Questioned Itachi as the red flame aura around him became more vibrant. Naruto merely looked back at the Uchiha and smirked ever so slightly. Because I can offer you what you always wanted. A chance. Spoke Naruto as he opened the octangular door fully, allowing the wind to smack against his form heavily as his bloodied cloak began whipping around. Both were currently located atop a pagoda-like mountaintop, with said pagoda being made entirely out of metal, and could be accessed only through the door Naruto opened. Around the pagoda were several mountain-like rock structures with various vegetation and minerals located atop the rocky spires, high above the clouds, where moisture was dense and winds were great. It would be near impossible for anyone to climb out the spires, as the rocks were slippery and the spires tall, where several days would need to be taken just to reach the top. Whether you take it or not is entirely up to you, said Naruto as he walked out of the pagoda and stood on the edge of the cliff, looking down into the ground, before gracefully falling off the edge without a twitch of fear. Itachi merely widened his eyes at the falling form of Naruto and merely chased after him, where the Uchiha jumped off the cliff following after the blonde. As Naruto was skydiving, headfirst through the clouds and dodging the cliffs, sensing the presence of Itachi gaining on him, he looked behind himself to see the Uchiha advancing and gaining on him. Naruto merely raised an eyebrow at Itachi, as even with Susanoo you couldn't survive the descent unless you had certain abilities. When Itachi had finally caught up to the blonde, Uzumaki Kaiichi slammed his body against Naruto and grappled with him, but Naruto broke out of the hold and punched Itachi twice and kicked him away. Itachi, not one to ever be deterred, took out the Tonbaguri no Tsurugi, which he had acquired from his previous battle with Naruto, and threw the sword at the Uzumaki, intent on killing him in mid-air. However, Naruto merely flipped and grabbed the Tonbaguri from mid-air and sealed it back into his wrist seals. Itachi, still with his Mangekyo Sharingan active, activated his Susanoo, where he manifested its skeletal arm and tried to grab Naruto, only for the blonde to counter with his own Susanoo, where he materialized a skeletal white arm, redirecting Itachi's attack. Faster and faster the duo sped down towards the ground, using the world's natural forces. The ground was almost in sight, and their impending doom was at hand. Faster and faster they sped down, never stopping, the wind feeling as if they were shredding their faces. Itachi's fear of death coming over him, advanced his Susanoo to the next stage, where the Uchiha formed his complete Susanoo. Its face was human-looking and its head was framed by locks of hair with a pointed chin and two sets of arms conjoined at the elbow, and was roughly the size of a house. Naruto merely deactivated his Susanoo, kept on speeding towards the ground before flipping in mid-air and allowing Itachi to pass him by where the Uchiha was in front. Naruto then channeled chakra into his left eye and activating his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Kamionaneo, Sutepu no Shinigami, Steps of the Death God, where a black and purple portal appeared before Itachi. Just a second before, he could slam against the ground, swallowing him up and sending him to a different location. The portal then closed, and Naruto reopened it again, where he, too, was swallowed up by the portal. One thing about the portal was that it needed a solid surface to materialize. When Itachi exited the portal, he never lost any of his momentum as he and his Susanoo crashed against a hard ground, completely and utterly devastating the ethereal warrior, where not even shards remained of its skeleton. The impact was great enough that it caused the ground to rupture and crack and dust clouds to form, and for Itachi to groan in pain as his Susanoo barely protected him. He had to hand it to Naruto. He knew how to use his abilities well. Itachi then stood up and brushed his cloak off any dirt, dust and rubble. He looked around the area and found himself back in Amigakure at the spot where Naruto and himself killed the root agents who had come to arrest or assassinate the blonde. However, there was something wrong with the image. Where was Minus? His question was soon answered where a black and purple portal opened to his right, and in less than a blink of an eye, Naruto came flying out. Like Itachi, he too had lost none of his momentum from the free fall as he used the earth's natural forces to in fact increase his power. He was so fast because of it that Itachi barely had time to recognize him, with the Sharingan being having a palm encircle his face and then slammed against a building of Amigakure. The force was so strong that the building fell to the ground, causing a dust cloud with debris and pipes scattered across the ground, and the impact of the building falling made the earth rumble a little. The people that felt the shocks and saw the people ran away in shock and fear at what was happening. While the dust cloud settled as the rubble and chaos fell all around them, Naruto held the prone body of Itachi, Uchiha, whose body was limp and his form torn and battered. Naruto then dropped the Uchiha onto the ground where the former Anbu captain merely slumped and fell like a pile of rocks. Naruto could sense that Itachi was still alive. Whether he was conscious or not depended as Itachi answered his questions. Either way, he did Nagato's bidding like a loyal dog chewing on his own collar. They say there is nothing stronger than our world. They say that no matter how much power we gain, how hard we train, or how much we aspire to be, that we are all nothing compared to the world. Small and insignificant. I just channeled the world's power into my own being. So one has to wonder if what they say is true. Spoke Naruto as he stared down upon the defeated Uchiha, who coughed a little from the feeling of his broken ribs. For Itachi, it felt like he was struck by 1,000 lightning bolts and having bricks rain down on him all at once. He couldn't feel anything other than the pain coursing through him and his own heavy heartbeat. Naruto, not expecting Itachi to answer, channeled chakra into his right eye, causing his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan pattern to appear. Tell me everything you know of the Uchiha massacre. Back in Konoha, Tsunade was currently looking over the frozen, solid forms of the root agents who were currently being thawed out by her shinobi and the massive hole in the hospital wall that her apprentice made. She had been informed of what happened by her apprentice Sakura, who was still not pleased with her. She told her of a mysterious blind girl that had infiltrated the hospital looking for a file on Naruto Uzumaki. Tsunade had to suspect that Iwa was involved, as when word got out that Naruto was Minato's son, the opinion on the blonde boy turned sour upon hearing the news. They were practically screaming for Naruto's head, although they did realize later that he was already dead. But still, only Iwa and Kuma would have had the resources and the abilities to do such a thing, while the girl's Keki Genkai matched that of Kiri, though Kuma may have simply kidnapped her for her Keki Genkai, or she fled from Kiri during the bloodline purges. It didn't matter at the moment, since those three villages were the prime suspects of such a thing. Though if she pressed the matter on the other villages, it could lead to a war that she was unprepared to fight because of all these wild events. But also, if Root was involved, Danzo must have pissed someone off. He had a habit of doing that. Turning a good situation and making it worse. Such as the incident surrounding the Anbu root agent, simply known as Takurufu. It was a good situation only for it to spiral out of control. That day could have been avoided altogether, but Danzo did it for the sake of Konoha. That was how he justified himself, believing himself to be superior to all others, either his way or the highway. Tsunade then heard the tapping of the cane and looked over her shoulder to see the most hated man in Konoha, while second most hated, Danzo Shimura. You wouldn't have had anything to do with this, Danzo? Questioned Tsunade as her brown orb stared at Danzo, who kept a straight face and hobbled over to stand by Tsunade's side. None. I know nothing of today's events. Only that whoever they were, they got more than they asked for. Spoke Danzo, to which the Hokage narrowed her eyes at the man. Of course she knew that what came out of his mouth was bullshit. She had nothing to convict him, but that didn't mean Tsunade couldn't investigate him. And where is your apprentice? The first-hand witness of this girl's powers? Queried Danzo as he watched as his soldiers were thawed about by medics and shinobi while the ground crunched all around them from the frozen grass. She debriefed us as soon as the main forces arrived, and then she left the village with Inzi Husoku for the capital to represent Konoha in the courts of the Land of Fire. Answered Tsunade as she kept her face neutral and to not show her disgust to the man beside her. You know what kind of message this would send to our enemies and our allies? Spoke Danzo as he, his squinted eye opened up to gauge Tsunade's reaction. This was all a test to see if Tsunade was being shaped into what he believed to be a truly great Hokage. Even with all the events that has happened and how Danzo tried to undermine Tsunade at every turn, it was shaping her into a different person. She couldn't see it, but he could, slight little details that couldn't be seen by those with untrained eyes. But he was to blame for today's events. As much as he wanted to deny it, he wanted to see what course of action Tsunade would be taking. Yes. Weakness. We need to train our forces harder, stronger. You've seen it too, the villages are rallying their forces, for what we don't know. And then Ryuyoke's and this girl enter the fray. You of all people should know that this is more than just a coincidence. Spoke Tsunade as she looked over to Danzo, who nodded at her. Yokeis, Akatsuki, the hidden villages, the 5 great nations, this is leading to something, events that were sparked long ago, since committed by people who are now dust. I feel that what is happening is the manipulation of events by an unknown faction or the guidance of a teacher. Whatever happens, we can be sure the Akatsuki will be involved somehow. Spoke Danzo as he stared back at the frozen root agents. If you wish to know, my spies and contacts have heard of whispers being spun about a shadow organization, known as the Kakuren, an organization made up of shinobi from all of the 5 great nations. If you haven't noticed, many shinobi have gone rogue and became missing nin from outside and within our own village, and the other villages, even the minor ones. Their operations are small, their resources limited, and we have no clue to their military strength. But one thing we do know is once they join, they disappear into nothingness, no trace of themselves left behind. The only way to tell they're gone is to check the list of shinobi. You'll see names missing and the number is smaller. They strike hard and fast, kill without question, then they fade into the night. The Kakuren are still an unknown factor, but I fear they will make their public appearance soon, and whoever is their leader will be spearheading their operations. I might regret this, but keep tabs on the Kakuren if it has someone like you. Well, being interested, the implications of their presence will be felt. Spoke Tsunade before leaving for her office. While Danzo stayed behind with a smirk on his face. Though he did fear what plans the Kakuren might have for Konoha. Back in Amigakure, Pain, or Nagato, whatever you wanted to call him, had just sensed the return of Itachi and Ryu, and he could see the dust cloud forming where the two were having their heated spar. He could sense that it was over quickly, and Zetsu had plucked a vibrant flower from a field of thorns. Ryuyoke's was an asset that Nagato couldn't lose. However, while he respected the man's strength, he wasn't too overly fond of the fellow himself. Especially his closeness with his childhood. Oh yes, he could see it, he wasn't blind, he felt the way the blue-haired woman was looking at him, and even now she had a similar look on her face. He then turned to his right to see Konan looking at with what appeared to be the tiniest amount of worry laced on her face. Nagato's real body, his crippled form, frowned at that. He also eyed her new scaled blue hair clips, although he wasn't a fan nor was he knowledgeable in jewelry, but even he knew that the clips were beautiful. He also saw her right hand, twitching a little, almost as if she wanted to place it over her heart, and with each passing second he could see her eyes drop ever so slightly. You seem to have grown very affectionate of Yoke's, spoke Nagato, making Konan snap her head at him with a slightly confused look on her face. She met her eyes with his metallic own and could see the near-dead look in those ringed orbs. At first those eyes made her nervous to just look into them. But through the years she had grown accustomed to the most powerful dojutsu. We are partners. Our relationship is professional, we just look out for each other. Answered Konan, who controlled her face and body, stared out across Amigakure like her friend. But was he right? Did she feel something for the powerful Sharingan wielder? She didn't know what to think of him. Behind that cold exterior was someone you aspired to love. Was it selfish of her to say that she wanted something like that, after all the years of heartache? Professional. Of course. Don't be clouded by feelings of longing. You of all people should have the wisdom to see that. And if we do give in to the primal feelings of sentimentality and appreciation, we simply lose that which is important to us. Spoke Nagato, making Konan frown slightly at him. She always did lose the one she truly loved, but perhaps there could be another chance for her. With Naruto and the defeated Itachi. After the Uchiha regaled Naruto with every dirt secret the elders of Konoha were hiding, Naruto couldn't help but grip his fist in anger. He had learned more than just the Uchiha massacre, he had learned more than just that, the worst secrets of the Hidden Leaf village. Because of the elders, the Hokage, the villagers, he was denied every chance to have those who he could love and care for. So is that everything? Said Naruto as he channeled more chakra into his right eye, making his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan appear. Yes. Breathed Itachi as he laid on the ground breathing, hoarsely hanging on a thread between life and death. Naruto then walked up to the downed shinobi and held up his right palm and used Shaosen Jutsu, mystical palm technique, and placed his palm over Itachi's chest, where the Uka's breath relaxed. Itachi knew that this was not an act of compassion from the blonde. Itachi knew that the Uzumaki had other plans for him, it just depended on what those plans were. With all that said and done, Naruto left Itachi on the ground and returned to Pain's Tower with his mission as a success. In the slums of the Land of Fire's capital, one blind girl with pale lavender hair, wearing a hood, was working her way through the slums to meet with a special person she had known since childhood. He was one of two people she could trust with her life and considered the man a brother in all but blood. She had to have a low profile, as her mere presence in Konoha has caused an uproar amongst the shinobi and the Anbu. Danzo has sent his root agents to track her down, and possibly use her to find the Maber. Quickly ducking her way in and out of the crowds and swarms of the poor and unlucky, she couldn't help but feel their depression. She had to do something for them, but too much attention may draw in the wrong kinds of crowd. But the poverty was palpable in the streets, and she knew her friend would be alright in this kind of area. Feeling everything around her through her chakra pulses, she could sense the people working away at their lives, crying and moaning, crime evident all around her. Until she felt something out of the ordinary. Two signatures whose feet were lighter than usual, shinobi. She felt a more detailed image within her mind, and they were lackeys of Danzig searching the slums for her. She quickly ducked into the alleyways and decreased the amount of chakra she exerted so to not warn any sensors of her presence. She quickly passed by a mugging and then skirted her away across the trash and dirt. She could no longer feel the root agents on her trail, but that didn't mean they were gone for good. She decreased the amount of chakra and was unable to feel a certain distance away. She had to meet with her friend, and quickly. Soon she finally found his home within the slums, a haggard and crusty-looking house with broken wood and bricks with holes in the roof and walls, and looked as if it could fall if you touched it, which was probably true since it looked fragile to the touch. The creaking wood inside was audible and the windows were about to fall off their hinges. Kyoku merely opened the door to the house, where it creaked loudly, alerting the person to her presence. Kyoku then pulled down her hood and found the person sitting on a chair with candy wrappers, comics and soda cans littered all around him and on his floor, while his snoring could wake the dead. If Kyoku could actually see, she would have giggled at the trail of spit that was leaking off the sides of the man's mouth. Every so often he would jolt about and mumble some incoherent words that only Koiku could understand. If he opened his eyes, the man had brown eyes and long crimson hair that reached his shoulders and covered much of his face while he was having his nap on his couch. Though most times he would wear his hair in a high ponytail just to keep it out of his face, to which he wore his hair, most of the time, in a high ponytail. He had currently foregone a shirt revealing his muscles and his tribal tattoos to anyone that would look upon him, and if Kyoku was able to see, she would note that he gained more tattoos since the last time she met him, and he had tribal tattoos covering his entire back, his upper torso and his forehead. He doesn't have eyebrows, as he now had tattoos for eyebrows. He was wearing hakama pants which were dipping slightly on his sides, with no shoes on, and with wristbands on his hands. Kyoku then screamed, making the man wake up and fall flat of his face with a shout as his cans and food fell all over him, and soon held his now bleeding nose form the fall and began rolling on the floor and possibly crying. This time Kyoku giggled at his misfortune while he mumbled obscene things, which would probably make his mother smack the upside of his head and give him an appropriate punishment befitting someone of his age. He then picked himself up off the ground and stuffed tissues into his nose to stop the bleeding, while he picked up a half-empty soda can off the ground and drank out of his before chucking it away, then looking towards Kyoku. "Oh, it's just you, Kyoku," said the man before he lay down on his side and soon fell back to sleep on his couch, while Kyoku developed a tick mark in annoyance at the man. "Oh, it's just you, Kyoku, we haven't seen each other in 6 months and that's the first thing you say to me, you lazy bum," spoke Kyoku as she crossed her arms and pouted like a child in annoyance at her friend. "Oh, it's just you, Kyoku, nice to see ya," spoke the man tiredly as he soon fell back to sleep, with the lavender-haired girl giving him a nod of acceptance. "So have you been busy, doing whatever you do?" spoke Kyoku, but she sweat dropped to find that her friend was dead asleep again, or he really was dead. She then kicked a can, smacking it right in the man's face as he screamed again in agony at the feeling of his bleeding nose, where he sat back up again and glared at the girl, who merely gave him an innocent smile. "No, seriously, it's good to see ya. Been lonely for some time." "Nothing to do then? Well, whatever it is I do." "So you dropped by to visit your good friend Eugen, huh? Beats breaking into Danzo's not-so-secret base and attempting to kill them, man," said the man now known as Eugen, who stretched his body and cracking his joints and neck. He had a really bad kink in it. Don't ask how I know, I just do, and since Danzo is still alive, it means you failed and you came by for me to give you a hug, a warm beverage and saying, it's alright before sending you on your way to the merry unknown. Kyoku merely crossed her arms and adopted a straight face, while she stood there unmoving, even though it was exactly why she came here, but there were other things to worry about. And you probably already know that Danzo has the Zensho. Spoke Kyoku, making Yujin stare at her blankly. What's the Zensho? Is it some kind of food? Questioned Yujin as he lazily opened his eye to stare at the blind girl who was tapping her foot at the man. Only the most powerful weapon ever created by man, a literal fuinjutsu weapon so advanced that only the next 5 generations will be able to partially replicate its complexity. It absorbs chakra all around it at a rapid rate that it's self-sufficient. It releases blasts of corrosive chakra in the form of lightning and shockwaves that it literally attacks chakra, rendering any shinobi powerless against it. And has the power to kill armies and biju with little to no trouble. Spoke Koiku with a preppy attitude that only an innocent child could copy. Sounds awesome. Replied Yujin as he smiled at the thought. Whoever made that weapon must have been the absolute master of fuinjutsu to create something so complex. He even doubted that the world-famous Uzumaki clan who were masters of fuinjutsu could create such a thing. No, it's not awesome. If Danzo has it, he could destroy the entire shinobi world with it. No one would be able to stand up to him, no matter how powerful. With the full power of the Zensho, not even the Shadaime would be able to defeat him. Yelled Kyoku, who then performed breathing exercises to calm her flustered mind. Well, since he hasn't already destroyed the world, that obviously means that he's not doing something right. I mean, if I had this Zensho thing, I would have probably taken over the world by now. Which is the real reason you're here. Spoke Yujin as he crossed his arms over his head. Kyoku then unlatched a large file from her waist that was being held by ninja wire, where she chucked it onto Yujin's lap, where he grunted where it plopped right on him. The Zensho was created by a root agent codenamed Takurufu, who weaved together many advanced and forbidden seals to form the weapon and give it physical shape. Spoke Kyoku, relaying her knowledge of the history of the Zensho. He made it specifically under the pretense that it would serve the Hokage and the village, only it was really being made for Danzo. Not many people know Takurufu's real name, but it was minus Naruto Uzumaki. Spoke Yujin as he read the file in his lap. Kyoku then breathed a sigh of relief that she had nabbed the right file. Honestly, she picked up the biggest one, believing it was his. She was glad, however, that her visit to Konoha wasn't a mere sightseeing trip. Yeah, anyway, he created the Zensho to serve the Hokage, and use it alongside one of his previous inventions, the Maber. Only then can the Zensho's power can be fully used. Spoke Kyoku as she kept on talking. However, Yujin wasn't listening as he kept reading the file. This guy, I mean kid, has suffered from every physical trauma documented in the world and possibly some new ones, and to suffer all that at his age. Throughout his whole life. Just reading the file made Yujin sick to his stomach. The things people did to this boy was unspeakable, and all of it was documented in the file. There was even harm done to him while he was being treated at the hospital. Kyoku merely listened to his words and tried to hold back a few tears that were beginning to fall. What kind of animals would do this to someone? I don't understand. It's best if you don't know, that suffering was inflicted long ago. It's best it stay that way. But does it say anything else? Queried Kyoku as she stared at her friend. Yeah, some notes here and there, but apparently one of the doctors found the kid scribbling away in a journal of some sort. It was documented and presented to the Hokage himself. All the doctors were able to see from the pages of the journal was darkness and the deep Zensho, only those without eyes. That's basically it. If you find the journal, you can probably find this. What's the Maber? Questioned Yujin with a deadpan voice. It's a dagger. Answered Kyoku nonchalantly. That's it. Queried Yujin, wondering if there was anything more to the Maber. It was the original prototype of the Zensho. While the Zensho can destroy anything with chakra within a short distance, the Maber could only be used if you stab someone with it, killing the person instantly because their chakra is destroyed by the dagger. When both are used together, the Zensho's full power is discovered. Answered Kyoku. It's probable that Naruto listed down the location of the Maber within his journal, and if so, should Danzo find it, we're screwed. So good luck trying to find it. Hope you have a merry adventure. Spoke Yujin as he threw aside Naruto's file and went back to sleep. What are you talking about? Don't you seek adventure? Asked Koiku merrily. No. Don't you wish to see everything this world has to offer? No. Don't you want to get stronger? No, I'm fine. That's it, you're coming with me, and you will like it. said Kyoku as she grabbed Yujin by the hair and pulled him out of his house as he was screaming obscene things at her. However, they forgot that Yujin was near naked with only his pants on. End of chapter 16.